So I'm going to share with you just two brief reflections by two authors of the 20th and 21st century. Our theme for this concert is Reflections for Joining Together in Faith, Hope, and Power. And these are reflections for considering that. So the first is words from Octavia Butler. And Octavia Butler is a science fiction writer and was also a parent of the Afrofuturism movement. And this is adapted from her essay called A Few Rules for Predicting the Future. A Few Rules for Predicting the Future. Just very brief part of this. She said, "No matter how hard we try to foresee the future, there are always surprises. The only safe prediction is that there will always be these surprises. So why try to predict the future at all if it's so difficult, so nearly impossible? Because making predictions is one way to give warning when we see ourselves drifting in dangerous directions. Because prediction is a useful way of pointing out safer, wiser courses. Because most of all, our tomorrow is the child of our today. Our tomorrow is the child of our today. Through thought and deed, we exert a great deal of influence over this child, even though we can't control it absolutely. Best to think about it, though. Best to try to shape it into something good. Best to do that for any child." So the second brief reading is words from Rosella Hyde White. And they are a theologian and spiritual leader. And it's adapted from a piece of hers called Collective Liberation. And they said, "God's second act of love was Jesus, God embodied as human. I find the most power and love of God in the incarnation. In Jesus, we see a God who loves us so passionately that God chose to embody love in human form and go through life with us. Jesus is liberation personified. Jesus brings to bear the inbreaking of a new world order, one that is marked more by the Beatitudes than by the powers and structures of the world. Jesus turns everything upside down and inside out. The things we thought we knew become further understood through a different perspective when we encounter a new life defined by grace. We often think of liberation as freedom from physical bondage, which it most certainly can be. But God's liberation in Jesus is about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual freedom. God cares about the whole person and the way that we live and the way that we love one another. I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. So that's a quote from Audre Lorde during her work in the 20th century, her liberation work, exploring gender and race. So she said that. And going back to Rosella Hyde White, and this was in this piece she wrote, she goes on and says, White goes on and says, "Here's the thing about liberation. It is experienced individually and shared collectively. In Jesus, we see that God was not solely concerned with the individual, but with the collective. Liberation is the act of creating freedom that can be experienced holistically. When our thoughts are free, and our feelings are free, and our bodies are free, and our souls are free, we're free. And when we're free, the world is free. The work of liberation is the work of justice, of a fierce and fiery cry for equity so that all may experience abundant life. The work of liberation is ongoing, and it's less about a one-time act, and more about a lifestyle. Isn't that what Jesus modeled? A lifestyle. So the signs that we are in bondage, Heide White says, the signs that we are in bondage to sin are all around us. And when I use the term sin in this context, I'm talking about being focused in a way that disconnects us from divine, from others, and from ourselves. This is the condition from which we may be seeking liberation. To be a follower of Christ is to be a seeker and a creator of liberation. Liberation brings healing, and divine wants us to be made well and to be made whole. Amen.